MACHIN3tools is a free collection of tools and Pie menus to streamline Blender. Instead of forcing the user to manage dozens different add-ons, it comes as a single package. However, you can still pick and choose which tools or Pie menus you actually want to activate. MACHIN3tools 0.3 runs on Blender 2.80 only. There are earlier versions on GitHub, but this new version has been completely overhauled. I won't spend any more time on the earlier versions, so I suggest you use this new version, if you are interested. The first thing I will do is activate and run the Customize tool. It adjusts various Blender settings and preferences to my liking. It picks the 2.7x keymap and further customizes it. Customization is of course deeply personal, and so you may want to skip this one, or pick out only specifics, like only the theme, or matcaps. The system prefs especially, you may want to leave turned off and tweak manually. With keymaps turned off, the 2.7x keymap will still be chosen, unless you turn off input prefs as well. Keymaps will simply do a number of changes to the 2.7x keymap. For details on the specific changes of the Customize tool, check out the documentation. The theme, by the way, is a mashup of the Flatty Dark Blueberry theme and the R theme, with some additional changes. The first Pie menu I'm activating is the Modes Pie, mapped to the Tab key. It allows for quick switching to specific modes. It can also set the rotate around selection pref dynamically and only for object mode. Press Tab to bring up the Modes Pie and click on a mode to switch to. You can be extremely fast with this and skip the clicking completely, once you remember where a specific mode is. There are two convenience features in the Modes Pie. First, the occlude pass-through toggle, which is useful to select through a mesh. And there's also the Auto Merge prop, which merges vertices automatically if they sit at the same location. The Modes Pie currently works for meshes, UVs, curves and armatures. The Save Pie is mapped on the Ctrl+S key combination and is used for all saving, loading, import and export, as well as appending and linking needs. Check out the incremental save. It's very nice. This is a fresh Blender, so the recent files list is empty. But if you open a file, it will be written to that list. If you then start a new file or quit Blender, you can always bring back the most recent file by just pressing Ctrl+S, followed by the R key. If you like to keep your startup file light, you can use the Save Pie's ability to append a world, maybe one containing multiple environments, as well as to append materials. Just set up the source files and select them in the preferences. For materials, add the material names you want to append to the collection. If you end a name with a dash, a separation will be shown in the Append menu, useful to visually group materials. You can also directly load the world and material source files. Before I continue with the shading pie, there is one more thing about the Save Pie. If you have a file other than the startup file open, you can easily load the next and previous files in the current folder. Remember that, if you don't like any of the default Keymaps MACHIN3tools sets, change them to your liking. I'm bringing up the shading pie with the page up key, which I have on my mouse. If you are a mouse user, definitely consider getting a Roccat or something similar. Roccats work great on Linux too. The menu allows you to toggle the grid, wires, outline, cavity, smooth or flat shading as well as auto smooth. The default way to toggle the grid is quite cumbersome. Notice the underlined letters in the buttons, which can be used to very quickly access these toggles. I just bring up the menu, followed by pressing G for the grid toggle. The wire toggle is used in the same way, but is a bit more complex and does different things. With nothing selected, it will toggle the wireframe overlay. With objects selected, it will toggle the wire object property. And in edit mode, it will toggle X-ray. The outline toggle is extremely useful to make out mesh decals in untextured views, and is also great in flat or soft shaded views. Cavity is excellent, to evaluate how your forms go together and the shapes they create doing so. Especially the cavity valleys. I'm not a fan of the ridges. I think they cheapen the look, and so have them set to 0. The properties in the center are self-explanatory, so I'm not going over them now. To the right you can switch between flat, studio and matcap shading. All of these have their uses. I prefer matcap most of the time, however. On top of the shading, you can choose how individual objects should be colored. If you have materials with different colors, you can run the Colorize Materials tool, to set the viewport colors based on the material colors in the node tree, if the tool can find them. I did it before already. With matcap shading, the matcap switch tool appears. It allows you to quickly switch between two matcaps, which you can determine in the preferences. So far, we've only been in solid shading, of course. In solid shading, you can use the pie button on the left side, to toggle overlays on and off. Grids, wires, selection highlights, all of it at once. On the right, you can switch to Look Dev mode, which is rendered in Eevee. The overlay toggle is now on the right. The shading pie remembers, for which view the overlays have been enabled and where they have been disabled. So you can choose to have overlays enabled for solid shading, but disabled for Look Dev. Switching shading will toggle overlays automatically. Instead of matcaps, you can choose environment maps in Look Dev mode. You can also access ambient occlusion, screen space reflections and bloom from here, even if the scene renderer is set to cycles. Wireframe shading, and rendered shading can be accessed as well. The Views Pie menu is used to set different views, as well as create and use different cameras efficiently. As for the orthographic views, I mostly use the front, right and top views, so these get their own pie buttons. There are additional buttons on the top for the other ones, if you ever need them. At the top left are a few useful camera tools. Most importantly, the Smart Cam tool. If you select a camera and run it, the view will be set to that camera, as well as make it the active scene camera if it isn't already, meaning, it will be the render cam. Running it without a camera selected, will always jump to the already active camera. You can also use the next and previous buttons to cycle through all scene cameras. Using the Q and W keys, this can be done very quickly. Without any camera in the scene, the Smart Cam 2 will create one at the current view. To create additional cameras, hold down the Alt key while running the tool. The orthographic views can also be used with the Alt key pressed. It's especially useful with the top view, which when Alt is pressed, will align to the current selection. This works in edit and object mode. There is also a drop-down menu to set the active scene camera by name. The Align Pie is mapped to the Alt-A key combination in edit mode. Using the Align Pie, you can align a selection of geometry to its minimum and maximum boundary, to 0, to the median and to the cursor. All of this is done in local space by default, and in world space when holding down Alt. Local space 0x, and world space 0x. Local space median x, and world space median x. And finally, cursor x in local space, and in world space. Pretty simple, but very useful. The cursor pie, mapped to Shift S, is my attempt to make Blender's Snap Pie more clear and usable. You can set the cursor to a selection or the world origin. And you can move a selection to the cursor. You can also set the object origin in this menu. Keep in mind that moving a selection to a cursor can be done in edit mode as well. If you want to use the Workspace Pie, you need to edit it in the Python file, to make it work with the names of your workspaces. I'm just gonna show how it looks here. Now on to the machine tools themselves. They are mostly focused on doing very simple and common things. The idea of the Smart tools is to do multiple things with a single keymap. Although the Smart Vert tool is the least smart of them, and takes the most keys. Smart Vert is primarily about merging vertices more efficiently. Blender's default way of doing this is using the Alt-M menu, which requires an additional keypress or click to determine where to merge. Smart Vert merges to the last selected vert immediately, when you press the 1 key. By pressing Shift 1, you can merge to the center. And by making a selection of 4 vertices like this, you can merge 2 parallel paths, by pressing Alt 1. Make sure to create a U-shape when doing your selection. The second path is selected in reverse. In a case like this, you may not want to merge, but connect the individual vert pairs, like the bridge tool would do, if there weren't a polygon. You can do that with Smart Vert, by using the Ctrl-Alt-1 shortcut, or by changing the mode from Merge to Connect in the Redo panel. If you are using the Merge Paths, or Connect Paths features of the Smart Vert tool, be aware that there are 2 ways to determine the paths. By topological distance, or by the actual distance of accumulated edge lengths. In this case, the outer path is shorter in topological terms, but longer in terms of edge length. Finally, there is one more tool built into Smart Vert. In earlier versions it was called Slide Extend. It can be used to slide a vertex, along an implicit edge, between any 2 vertices, using the Shift-Alt-1 key combination. This can be useful to avoid having to slide on existing edges multiple times. Usually you would use it with the diagonally opposite vert, to maintain the face flatness, but it can be used arbitrarily. Smart Edge is mapped to the 2 key. In vert mode, with nothing selected, pressing 2 will invoke the knife tool. If you make a selection and press 2, Smart Edge will connect the verts in the sequence they have been selected. With an edge selection of up to 3 edges, it will turn the edges. With a selection like this, the tool will star connect to the last vert. This can sometimes be useful to make the bevel modifier behave. Finally, you can select faces, by selecting an edge loop around them. And similarly, you can turn a face selection into an edge loop selection. Smart Face is mapped to the 4 key, but as always, change it to whatever you like. It's primarily about smart face creation, similar to how the popular F2 tool works. I messed up and didn't remove the faces properly here. Leaving verts and edges behind. I don't have the cleanup tool active yet, so I'm gonna undo and repeat the face deletion properly. To create a face, select a single vertex in a negative corner like this, and run the tool. Smart Face will try to make a new selection afterwards, so you can run the tool again immediately. If the proper topology can't be found, nothing will be selected. Even in a case like this, only a single vert selection is necessary, as long as the merge property is enabled. Otherwise, a 2-vert or an edge selection is required to close the face properly. If you run the Smart Face tool on a face selection, a new object will be created from those faces. The cleanup tool is mapped to the 3 key. It does a number of things and I tend to run it all the time when modeling, to keep the mesh clean. In the Redo panel, you can choose what it should do. This cube has a number of issues. There are flipped normals, two-edged vertices, loose verts and edges, non-manifold edges, etc. Cleanup can deal with, or point out all of these issues. It can remove doubles and degenerates based on a threshold value. It can dissolve loose vertices, edges and even faces. As for two-edged vertices, a distinction is made between those on the inside of a mesh and those on the boundary non-manifold edges. Interior two-edged vertices will always be removed, while those on non-manifold edges will be removed based on an angle threshold. These corner verts are two-edged, but you probably want to keep them, as they contribute to the shape of their polygons. Normals are made consistent, and can be flipped in cases where Blender gets the direction wrong. Finally, by default the tool will select non-manifold edges. Usually you want to be aware of these areas, and so the selection highlighting draws attention to them. Alternatively, you can also select triangles or n-gons. The clipping toggle goes through 3 preset clipping values and sets them for the clip start of the 3D view. If you work in a perspective viewport, and you ever want to inspect geometry close-up, and parts of it vanish, it's very nice to be able to quickly change the clipping. The focus tool is used to isolate specific objects. I have Blender's view selected, mapped to the F key, so focus is mapped to Ctrl F accordingly. Make a selection of objects and run the tool. Everything but those objects will be hidden. In addition, mirror modifiers will be toggled off, if any are found, so you can focus on the originals. What makes this tool special is that it works on multiple levels. You can go deeper with new selections. And deeper again. To go up one level, just run focus again, but with nothing selected this time. It's so easy, and so useful. These objects were real mirrored with MeshMachine before, so I'm just going to enable the mirror modifiers on the originals again. You can see what a difference the automatic unmirror does, when you want to actually focus on an object. The mirror mods will be re-enabled automatically, once you're stepped up the focus history again. The mirror tool allows you to quickly mirror multiple objects, across another object. It's very simple right now, but with the upcoming ports of Decal Machine and Mesh Machine, I will suggest you use this tool to mirror decals, as well as plugs. Finally, the Align tool, which compared to the Align Pie, works in object mode, but is also mapped to the Alt-A key combination by default. The tool provides per-axis control, for the alignment of location, rotation, and scale to another object. In addition to aligning objects to another object, you can also use Align to drop objects to the floor. Machine Tools is free, and constantly evolving. I hope you find some of the things it does useful. And if you do, maybe consider supporting my other work. Thanks. Also, shout out to Wazoo, and his awesome Pie menus, which were my first exposure to the potential of Pie menus in Blender 3 years ago.